Hi, everybody. It's Professor Mitchell, continuing Chapter 5 on decimals. Today we are talking about dividing decimals. So the objectives in this section are to divide decimals and estimate when dividing decimals, divide decimals by powers of 10, evaluate expressions with decimal replacement values, and finally solve problems by dividing decimals. So again, just like with addition, subtraction, and multiplication, dividing decimals is similar to dividing whole numbers. What we really need to talk about is how to place the decimal point in the quotient, which is the answer to the division problem. So let's start with dividing by a whole number. When you divide by a whole number, just place the decimal point in the quotient directly above the decimal point in the dividend, and then divide just like you're dividing whole numbers. So here's an example. We're dividing 11 8/10 by 2. So you see the first thing I've done here is place the decimal point directly above this decimal point. And then you're going to have to dust off your long division. 2 into 11 goes 5 times. 5 times 2 is 10. 11 minus 10 is 1. Bring down the 8. Sorry, this is not lined up perfectly. 2 goes into 18 9 times, and then 9 times 2 is 18. And so that 0 tells me that I'm finished. There are no more numbers up here to bring down. The quotient is 5 9/10. All right, so here's the first official example. We're dividing 219 2/10 by 8. All right, so here it is all set up. First thing I'm going to do is 8 into 21 goes 2 times. 2 times 8 is 16. 21 minus 16 is 5. Bring down the 9. And then I go 8 into 59 goes 7 times. 7 times 8 is 56. 59 minus 56 is 3. Bring down the 2. And finally, 8 into 32 goes 4 times. 4 times 8 is 32. 32 minus 32 is 0. I don't have anything else to bring down up here. The quotient is 27 4/10. And remember, as a check to a division problem, you can multiply the quotient by the divisor. If you multiply the quotient by the divisor, you can see that that comes out to 219 2/10, which is the original dividend. So that checks out. All right, here's one for you to try if you'd like to pause the video. Let me just caution you, this one's going to be a little different. You're going to have to tack a 0 onto the 6/10, and you'll see why in a second when we go over this. Okay, so let's say I didn't have that 0 there to begin with. I would start by going, first of all, place the decimal point here. With decimals, you have to be really careful with your zeros. It makes a big difference where that decimal point goes, how many zeros are to the left and to the right. All right, so 4 goes into 6 one time, and that 1 goes here directly above the 6. 1 times 4 is 4. 6 minus 4 is 2. Now, if I didn't have that 0 here, I would be trying to divide 4 into 2. 4 doesn't divide into 2, so I bring down a 0. 4 into 20 goes 5 times. 5 times 4 is 20. 20 minus 20 is 0. Okay. And you could make this problem about money. If you had 60 cents and you were trying to divide it up among 4 people, each person would get 15 cents. And here is the check. Just like in the last one, you can multiply 15 hundredths times 4 and see that that comes out to 60 hundredths, which is the same thing as 6/10. All right, now when your divisor is a decimal, that's a little different. What you have to do then is move the decimal point in the divisor to the right until the divisor is a whole number, all right? And then move the decimal point in the dividend the same number of places. So if you had to move the decimal point in the divisor 2 places to make it a whole number, you also move it 2 places to the right in the dividend. All right, and then now that your divisor is a whole number, it's going to work out just like the last couple examples. All right, so here's the first example. We're dividing 6 and 888 thousandths by 2 and 8 tenths. Okay, so I start off setting it up like this, but then I need to make that 2 and 8 tenths into a whole number, so I'm going to move the decimal point 1 place to the right, and I have to do the same thing in the dividend. Okay, so the new problem is 28 into 68 and 88 hundredths. So that works just like before. 28 goes into 68 2 times. 2 times 28 is 56. 68 minus 56 is 12. Bring down the first, this 8 right here. And now 28 into 128 goes 4 times. 4 times 28 is 112. 128 minus 112 is 16. Now bring the last 8. 28 into 168 goes 6 times. 6 times 28 is 168. 168 minus 168 is 0. The quotient is 2 and 46 hundredths. All right, so here's one you can try. We will also be estimating to see if this answer is reasonable. So go ahead and pause the video and try this one. Unpause when you're ready. Okay, so the first thing we've done is move the decimal point 1 place to the right in 2 and 8 tenths, which means we have to do the same thing in the dividend. So this is going to be the same problem as 28 into 2,583. Okay, so 28 goes into 258 9 times. 9 times 28 is 252. 258 minus 252 is 6. Again, I'm sorry, this is not lined up very well. And bring down the 3. 28 into 63 goes 2 times. 2 times 28 is 56. 63 minus 56 is 7. And now I'm going to bring down a 0. 28 into 70 goes 2 times. 2 times 28 is 56. 70 minus 56 is 14. Bring down another 0. 28 into 140 goes 5. And 5 times 28 is exactly 140. So that comes, in the end, that comes out to 0, which means that is the exact answer. Now, estimating when dividing decimals is a little bit, what's the word? Little bit less clear-cut about exactly how to round the numbers. So what your book seems to be doing is rounding to the nearest numbers that will give you a nice, easy problem. Like in this case, they rounded the 2 and 8 tenths to 3. So they rounded it to the nearest whole number. And they rounded 258 and 3 tenths to the nearest 100. So 300, just to make a nice, easy problem. And it's easy to see that 300 divided by 3 is 100. That is reasonably close to 92 and 25 hundredths. So that is a reasonable answer. All right, here's one that you can try. 54 hundredths divided by 12. Okay, so we are dividing by a whole number this time, which means we don't have to move any decimal points. 12 goes into 54 4 times. Remember that the decimal point goes directly above this decimal point, and the 4 goes directly above the 4 in 54. That's why you have to put a 0 here. Okay, again, the zeros can be a little tricky. 4 times 12 is 48. 54 minus 48 is 6. Bring down a 0. 12 into 60 goes 5. 5 times 12 is exactly 60. So the quotient is 45 thousandths. And for the estimate on this one, they rounded 12 to 10, and they rounded 54 hundredths to 50 hundredths. 10 into 50 hundredths goes 5 hundredths, and that is pretty close to 45 thousandths. Okay, so remember, going back a few sections to comparing decimals, it's easy to see that this and this are pretty close together if you tack a 0 onto the end of 5 hundredths. All right, 50 thousandths versus 45 thousandths. It's pretty close. Okay, now we get into dividing by powers of 10. Remember, in the last section, we said to multiply by a power of 10, such as 10, 100, 1,000. You move the decimal point the same number of places to the right as there are zeros in the power of 10. Since division is the inverse or the opposite of multiplication, we're going to move the decimal points to the left when we're dividing by these big powers of 10. Okay, so for example, 456 and 2/10 divided by 10, you would move the decimal point 1 place to the left, and you would get 45 and 62 hundredths. All right, and if you divided by 1,000, 1,000 has 3 zeros. You would move this decimal point 1, 2, 3 places to the left, and that quotient would be 4,562 ten thousandths. All right, so again, the rule is if you're dividing by a power of 10, such as 10, 100, or 1,000, 10,000, a million, anything like that, move the decimal point in the dividend to the left, the same number of places there are zeros in that power of 10. So very similar to the rule for multiplying, except when you multiply, you move it to the right because you're making a bigger number. Now we're making a smaller number. All right, so these two should be pretty easy. Give you a chance to think about these two. 548 and 6/10 divided by 1,000. There are 3 zeros in 1,000, so 1, 2, 3. That's going to come out to the decimal point is going to go right in front of the 5. So that's going to be 5,486 ten thousandths. In this one, we're dividing by 10. Decimal point goes 1 place to the left. The answer is 68 thousandths. All right, now we have an example of evaluating expressions. They want me to evaluate x divided by y if x is 35 thousandths and y is 2 hundredths. So this is just a division problem, dressed up to be a little fancier. Okay, it's going to turn into 35 thousandths divided by 2 hundredths. So this is one of those problems where you're going to have to move the decimal points in both numbers. Instead of like this, we're going to move the decimal points 2 places to the right. So we're dividing 2 into 3 and 5/10. 2 into 3 goes once. 1 times 2 is 2. So they didn't show all their work here with the long division. In the end, so this is something you should try just to make sure you're really getting the hang of the long division. Again, it's really the same as if these were whole numbers. It's the same as 2 divided into 350. It's just that you're putting the decimal point directly above the decimal point in the dividend. So the answer is 1 75/100. All right, that brings us to an application problem. A bag of fertilizer covers 1,250 square feet of lawn. Tim Parker's lawn measures 14,800 square feet. How many bags of fertilizer does he need? If he can only buy whole bags of fertilizer, how many whole bags does he need? And fertilizer is generally sold in whole bags. Okay, so if he needs some fraction of a bag, he's just going to have to get another whole bag. Okay, so to figure out the number of bags, you divide the area of the lawn by the amount each bag covers. So this is going to be 14,800 divided by 1,250. And that comes out to 11 84/100. So that is the exact number of bags he needs. But if he's going out to the store and getting bags of fertilizer, he's going to have to buy 12 bags. And that's the end of section 5.4.